And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska aviation weather outlook on this Tuesday, August 6th, 2024. We have a lot going on still. As of this Tuesday, we still have this ridge, warm ridge of high pressure over the eastern mainland along the Alcan border back toward the Panhandle. Temperatures have been in the 80s. We've seen 80-degree readings Tuesday and again, Monday and again this Tuesday along the Arctic coast. A few readings approaching 90 along the east central interior, Yukon Flats, upper Tanana Valley, where we have red flag warnings for critical fire weather conditions due to breezy conditions with hot temperatures, low humidities. MVFR conditions spreading into the Panhandle come Wednesday morning. We have widespread IFR along the Gulf, especially central Gulf and western Gulf Coast, including Prince William Sound, the Kenai Peninsula down through Kodiak Island. Also IFR conditions up along the Susitna Valley, back through the southwest interior and coast and up through the Bering Strait. Continue to have the feed of moisture coming in on an atmospheric river, a very slow-moving front that's working its way just slowly eastward, and this is focusing some of the heaviest rainfall along the eastern Kenai Peninsula into Prince William Sound for Wednesday into Thursday. Even the Anchorage Bowl area could receive around or over an inch of rainfall going through early Friday morning. Now, by the time we get into Wednesday afternoon, still widespread IFR conditions in the Gulf, just offshore of the Panhandle, up into Prince William Sound, the east side of the Kenai Peninsula, and again up along the west side of the Susitna Valley, especially there on the eastern slope there, the west arm of the Alaska Range. We have IFR conditions up there around Point Hope, down through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence and Nunavik Islands, also way out toward the central Aleutians. And then as we get into Thursday morning, we start to see some of these IFR conditions getting up against the coast here of the Panhandle, outside of Yakutat, Prince William Sound, eastern Kenai, along areas of the central southern Alaska Range on the south slopes, and then back again up here, St. Lawrence, parts of the Seward Peninsula, all the way up into the Chukchi Sea. And finally, Thursday afternoon, we expect those IFR conditions to be hugging along the Panhandle coastline up there toward Yakutat, through Cape Suckling, back up into the lower Copper River basin, and then over the eastern half of the Gulf. The spigot there on that atmospheric river should begin to break down later Thursday into Friday. And then up here along the Arctic coast, off of the Arctic coast, we have IFR conditions, Beaufort Sea, Chukchi Sea, and then also out here across the Bering, there's going to be another strong low for Friday into Saturday, coming across the Bering Sea and then moving into the lower Yukon Delta by Saturday morning. That's going to be a windy and wet system with weather impacts, so stay tuned to upcoming forecasts for that. In the meantime, though, we're expecting MVFR conditions there for the eastern half of the Brooks Range. Wednesday, MVFR at Anatuvik Pass. A little further east, Adigan Pass should hold on to VFR during the day on Wednesday. Still warm temperatures like around Arctic Village, Kaktovik, down along the Alcan border. A number of areas still could see readings at or above 80 degrees. Now, as we go down along the west arm of the Alaska Range, that west side of the Susitna Valley, IFR conditions for Wednesday with some moderate to locally heavier rainfall, low cloud cover, visibility, low ceilings. So Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR, Rainy Pass, IFR, going up through the central Alaska Range, coming up along that the glide that as you're rising up there toward Windy Pass, IFR conditions. And then as we get a little further east, Isabel, MVFR becoming VFR, and same thing, Mentasta Pass, MVFR in the morning becoming VFR as that ridge, even though it is breaking down and working its way eastward, should still allow areas of the eastern mainland to hold on to relatively VFR conditions on Wednesday. Tanita Pass, though, MVFR down across the Copper River Basin, and by the time you get toward Prince William Sound, the Gulf, Portage Pass will be socked in with IFR, and certainly plenty of rain, low ceilings, visibility, and lower cloud cover and some fog. Chilcoot and White may start out MVFR early on Wednesday, giving way to VFR conditions, and much of the Panhandle try to hold on to VFR conditions, though some areas will start to tap into some of that marine moisture and MVFR conditions. So looking at the freezing levels aloft, the ridge or axis of the high pressure has shifted. It was over this way this past weekend and on Monday. By Wednesday, it's shifting further east into northwest Canada. We have freezing levels aloft above 14,000 feet centered on Yukon, Northwest Territories, down into the Panhandle. Very warm dome of air. Back to the west, though, we transition across the mainland. Freezing levels fall from above 12,000 feet up around Fairbanks to near 6,000 feet along the lower Yukon Delta coastline. And then this trough of low pressure sitting out over the Bering. Freezing levels aloft are lower, generally below 4,000 feet here in the central Bering, dipping down into the central Aleutians. So the greatest threat for moderate icing will be across areas of the Western Gulf, Kenai Peninsula, on up into the Susitna Valley, near the Central Alaska Range, and perhaps extending north in areas along the Yukon River north of there. Above 12,000 feet, though, giving those high freezing levels aloft. Above 15,000 feet in the Gulf, given those high freezing levels aloft. But as we tap back here toward the west, we find those freezing levels coming down, so above 8,000 feet around Nunavik Island. And then as we get way back out here toward the western Aleutians, as that next system, just the hints of it begin to approach the western Aleutians, we could find some moderate icing above 10,000 feet in the western Aleutians on Wednesday. Here, the upper level jet stream pattern at 30,000 feet, very clearly defined, amplified ridge trough combo. We have this ridge out over northwest Canada, the Panhandle. Back to the west, we have the trough over the Bering Sea, eastern Russia, with a very defined jet core of 90 to 110 knots along the west side of the mainland. We bring it down to 9,000 feet or around 700 millibars, a very broad southerly flow anywhere from, say, 35 to over 50 knots, especially coming up into south central Talkeetna Mountains, central Alaska Range. That's why there are wind advisories in this region of the Alaska Range through the gaps. These strong southeast to south winds could cause considerable turbulence. And then as we bring it down to 3,000 feet, we find still coming up into the Gulf along this very slow-moving frontal boundary that's the conduit for that atmospheric river to push in the moderate and heavy rainfall along the western, northwestern Gulf. Winds of 35 to 40 knots coming into that region. And then behind me, there's the hints of the next low entering the western Aleutians, the kind of the lead winds ahead of the trough. So turbulence on Wednesday. Moderate turbulence, pretty extensive along and north of the Alaska Range, as well as south. Talkeetna Mountains surrounding Prince William Sound, the Kenai Peninsula, Middle Upper Cook Inlet, as well as back up along areas of the western interior. Areas around and just to the north of the Alaska Range, surface to 8,000, surface to 10,000 feet. Again, stronger gap winds continuing through areas of the mountains. Along the Gulf Coast, surface to 6,000 feet, could be surface to 8,000 feet, Talkeetna Mountains, and then back out here toward the western and southwest interior. We expect moderate turbulence, surface to 4,000 feet, and then back out here toward the central Aleutians, there could be a pocket of moderate turbulence, surface to 3,000 feet on Wednesday.